nice to see everybody tonight. Thanks for coming out. So I get to interview two amazing people. They are alums of CMCI. I'm happy to introduce you to Savannah Sellers. She's a correspondent for NBC News and MSNBC, and she's co-host of Stay Tuned. It's a twice daily news show on Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok. She's also a Today Show correspondent and has a franchise called Stay Tuned Today. Savannah received a news and documentary Emmy for her work as a producer on the NBC nightly news series Hooked, America's Heroin Epidemic. She graduated from CU in 2013. She has a degree in journalism, and in 2019, she was the youngest person to ever give our commencement address. So welcome, Savannah Sellers. I'm also thrilled to introduce you to Baker Machado. He co-hosts morning and daytime programs from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange for Cheddar. Cheddar is a live streaming financial news network. He also hosts specialty programs like Cheddar Politics, Cheddar at Home, and Cheddar's Cannabis. In addition, you can see Baker's reports from the pump screens at more than 7,000 gas stations, as well as on various local TV stations, including KUSA 9 in Denver. So I have questions for you guys. Here's the first. I told everyone what your shows are, but can you tell everyone, what do you really do? I imagine it's not what broadcast journalists did 20 years ago. So Savannah, let's hear about it.
Absolutely. Actually, I was planning on singing also.
Yeah. When do we get to do that?
I'm just kidding. That's so rude that we have to follow him. He was so fantastic. So every day we put together the show on Snapchat, and I guess what I would say that I really do is communicate news in a different way than it's ever been communicated to a different audience than you traditionally think of as a news audience. So on our show on Snapchat, we're really trying to just talk about the news in the same way that you would talk to your friends about the news, rather than like all of a sudden I'm not on my show like, hi, I'm Savannah and I'm the anchor here. I just talk like myself. And we write it in a very different way than I write when I'm doing something for a different type of newscast. And we have a totally new audience. We have about 11 million subscribers who are for the most part under the age of 24. And it's been really cool to see that. I think that there was this misconception about young people that they don't care about the news, when I just think we weren't really meeting them where they were consuming content anyway. So I think that's what I would do every day that I say. And then behind the scenes, there's a lot of running around and planes and travel to, this month has been crazy because of the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary and the Nevada caucus. I've been at all those different events for MSNBC and NBC News. So all those different types of things. But as far as journalists a long time ago, definitely different because of my Snapchat show.
I don't even know how, but I can get behind that. My God, that was amazing. Oh, I would rather say.
By the way, he's having a huge week. If anybody knows what's happening with the stock market right now, and you're reporting from the floor.
Yes, we're having a great week. We're all poor after this week is what's been happening. So, like Savannah, we're like disruptors in the news industry. We're not basically giving you the same stuff that you're accustomed to seeing on cable news. We're trying to get something to you in bite-sized formats, something shorter, something that gets your attention. And there's a million different platforms out there, Snapchat, OTT streaming platforms, all of this stuff. So my day every day is I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning every single day, and I go to the New York Stock Exchange. I get to talk to traders. I get to talk to CEOs, I get to talk to celebrities, and I get to do that all day, and it's honestly the greatest job ever. So, yes.
So let me ask you to both reflect back on your futures and your past. What's ahead, and what got you started in this business? What was your first job?
My first job after Boulder was in this thing called the Page program at NBC. If anybody's ever seen the show 30 Rock, Kenneth the Page, yeah, and I did have to wear that same, I was going to call it a costume, but they would prefer if I called it a uniform. And no. No, you don't get to keep the jacket. And what's really funny is when I got into the Page program, they talk about how you're going to have your fitting and they would probably not love that I'm saying this, but you talk about your fitting and everything, and really you just like take an old one and go to the dry cleaner downstairs. But it was really, I mean, it's the coolest job in the entire world because it's just entry into the media world. And especially having just moved here from Colorado. I mean, you're like riding the elevator with Jimmy Fallon and a bunch of pages work on SNL and you're doing all these cool things. And I always knew that I wanted to go into news. So I specifically was at the Today Show for most of my time as a page. So you're kind of just doing anything and everything, getting celebrities who are at the Today Show to sign their contracts for the music deals so that we can re-air their songs a little bit later and all this kind of crazy stuff, getting people coffee. But it's been the coolest thing because those types of experiences are what I think just saying yes to everything got me to where I am today, just kind of being willing to do it.
For me, my first job actually was at E! News in Los Angeles. And it's weird how I actually got that job. Does anybody remember the Balloon Boy story back home in Colorado? Remember the story of the family that was on Wife Swap? And then they potentially had their kid up in that balloon, that tinfoil balloon, but the kid wasn't in there. He was actually in the attic the whole time. So I was in school in Boulder when that happened. And weirdly enough, all the news networks went to go cover that story. And I basically pitched myself to E! At the time, who was there, and said, listen, I'll freelance for you guys as a way to get my foot into the door. And that's how I got my first job. So after I graduated, E! News called me and was like, we'd love to keep you. So if you know the Heaney family who did the Balloon Boy story, please let them know I love them very much. I will send them a fruit basket or anything else because I got my job because of that amazing story.
So that might have been your favorite story. But let me ask, of all the things you guys have covered, what's the one that sticks out for you? What's the one that's most memorable?
This is a question I get asked a lot, and I have two answers that are kind of on different ends of the spectrum. I'll start with serious and then take it a little higher. For me, I went down to Parkland, Florida several times after the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and I still talk to those kids all the time. It was just the 2-year anniversary of the shooting. Many of them I'm like in constant contact with, or I go see them or whatever, because they've all moved on now that they've graduated high school. It was just like obviously devastating for all of us as Americans to see something like that happen in our country, but then to see what the students there did afterwards was, I think, something that we hadn't really seen before, and I think it was a really good indicator of the entire global community taking young people really seriously when they've decided that they want to make a change in their world. And so it's just something that stuck with me, and so have the relationships. And then on a happier note, I got to go to the royal wedding of Meghan and Harry, and that was just obviously cool. It was just like a castle and, all the royal stuff.
I would say the Oscars was probably my favorite thing that I've covered. It was not at this job, but it was at my previous job. I did just go to the New Hampshire primary just a few weeks ago. You can attest to it. It's an insane thing that in terms of the attention, the news media, the interest from the public on it. And at that moment you're doing a public service to people. And that's a really important thing. And I think that reinforces why we got into this business to begin with.
Same with the Iowa caucus on that night and the next day and the next day.
Oh, okay, wow. So this is my last question for you. Think back to your days on the Boulder campus, maybe a very impactful professor or a class or an experience.
Definitely. I cannot speak highly enough of news team and Paul, right? I know, and fewer students are doing news team because of the way that different capstones have changed since it's become CMCI. But news team literally is what I do in my job every day now. I mean, just from little terms that you need to know to not seem like you are like so from out of town within a newsroom, and also just understanding what's going on in a control room. So for those of you that don't know, news team is a class that each student rotates through all different positions in a live broadcast. So you go through every position that is in a control room, which is the executive producer of a show, but also the director, where you're literally saying, take camera 2, take camera 3, that type of thing. And then also the positions that are on air and the producing positions. And that knowledge is truly something I go back to. I'm not even exaggerating, every single day in my job, like how to produce something, how to write something, how to put it together. And I am much better at my job on camera because of that experience behind the camera. And then Kelty Logan was another professor who had spent time in New York, and her class I actually took freshman year. So it was my first journalism class, and as soon as I heard that she had worked in New York, I asked her to get coffee. And so on my 4th day of school at CU Boulder, we went and got coffee, and she's somebody who set me up with people here in New York, and I still talk to her all the time. I love her.
I totally agree with you about news team, by the way. Amazing. And still to this day, everything you learned in that class, you are absolutely right. You still use today. I would say Paul Doherty. Paul Doherty is if you have the opportunity to take a class with Paul Doherty, he is brilliant. He is smart. He is fun. He is sweet. He is kind. He's basically from The Help. He's amazing. But no, you have to take a class with Paul Doherty.
I agree.
All right. This was great. Please join me in thanking Savannah and Baker.